see Jeff Brownell popping up and Director Gowan. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Monterell. Director Gowan, can you hear us? Are you on? You are.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
All right, great. Thanks. And there's Mr. Brownell. So with that, we're going to turn it over to you. I understand that you have a presentation, Mr. Brownell, and we're going to give you sharing privileges so that you can have that on the screen as you present.
Okay. Yeah, so I see it here.
Chair Walsh, can we have a copy of this sent to us after, or I apologize if it's already been sent, but just to email this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm not ready to ask.
I love.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can, Mr. Brownell. Thank you.
Okay, I hear a background noise. Do you hear that? Or is that?
I do not, and I can only see Ms. Catronio now on my screen since she's shaking no.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I think it stops. Now I can hear. So yes, so thank you, Chair Walsh. We were asked to give a presentation. Before I begin, though, the question is, so what do you want to see? So, for example, we were given a question about the current state of APFO. What I've done is prepared kind of an overview of APFO, given that we know that there's a few new board members, but at the same time, I'm very well aware that you guys are all knowledgeable of APFO. So the question is, do you want me to go through this overview of APFO, or do you want to kind of skip to the current state of affairs of APFO? I don't want to present something that may not be valuable for you all.
Dr. Wu, yeah, go ahead,
yes,
Dr. Wu.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Chair Walsh. And so I have two questions. The reason I want we have a discussion on this and on our agenda, there are two questions for me about the APFO. The first question is, I heard about there will be going to relax of APFO. At the same time, we know our school overcrowding has been an issue. I just wonder how that will impact our school system, because the overcrowding issue will not go away. But if we relax in that, which is getting more crowded, that's not something everybody wants to look at. The other issue about the change in the code, right? Will that really help us, or another impact is like concentrating of affordable housing in one area, which is really difficult for the school when we look at the farm number in our school and for redistricting for other purposes, and it's not really helpful for us. I just wonder, will there be any changes to that as well? So that's two questions for the topic related to the BFO. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I think we can address those questions. The first question about the relaxing of APFO, there is no relaxing of APFO. So the legislation, the APFO legislation, remains in effect, and so we're enforcing APFO like we always have. So there's no relaxing of APFO. I'm not quite sure where the impression might have come from, where there was thinking that there was some relaxing of APFO. But as far as DPZ's concerned, and we enforce the subdivision regulations, and APFO is part of the subdivision regulations. So all development plans need to go through the subdivision regulations and also APFO in order to be able to proceed. So nothing has changed with that. Amy, I'm not sure if you want to say anything in relation to the general plan.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like Chairman Wu's questions are probably a little more related to some of the conversations we're having around Hoco by Design, which is the county's general plan update. So I have maybe like 3-4 slides on that, which I think will answer some of your questions. Should we just skip to that? And then if we need to go back, we could
sure, that's
present some of your.
Yeah, so let me bring it up and I can go to.
Yeah, so if you could just put up the Hoco by Design, I can run through this in like less than 5 minutes, probably. So as many of you are aware, the county is updating our general plan, which we do every 10 years. That effort is called Hoco by Design. And we're currently right in the middle of our general plan update. And so the next slide, so as you know, AFFO has kind of like the three prongs, which is the housing test, the schools test, and then the transportation test. And so the test and the component that's in the general plan are the housing allocations. And so currently in our general plan, we allocate housing units roughly according to the planning areas in our land use map. So we have allocations that go to the growth and revitalization areas, the established communities, and then the rural west. And then we have a downtown Columbia category and a green neighborhoods category in addition to that. So this map will change through the new general plan update process. And depending on how this map changes, we may adjust how the housing allocations are divided up throughout the county. So that's probably the main connection between APFO and the general plan update. Now, if you can run to the next slide, talks about kind of the schools component. And so when the legislation was passed, this is the language that was written into the APFO legislation, which basically says within 1 year of enactment of the new general plan, that there should be a APFO committee convened to evaluate the impact of the current ordinance and then make recommendations. So any types of changes to how schools would potentially be evaluated would occur through this APFO review committee process, which would happen after the general plan update. And so really, what we're looking to do with the general plan is provide guidance to this committee. So this committee doesn't have to start from square one. The general plan could make some general recommendations for different areas that the committee might want to explore as they start their deliberations. We don't know yet what those are going to be because a lot of this is going to be based on what the future land use map ends up looking like in the general plan. So if you just go to the last slide, that's to give you a sense of our timeline and where we're at. We're right here in the middle under scenario modeling and testing. So we are actually this week going to be releasing 4 different scenarios that that represent different types of futures for the county. And so the idea is that the public would weigh in on components of each of those that they prefer. And from that, we would create what we'll call a hybrid scenario. And that will be the county's future growth model moving forward over the next 20 years. And then that is what converts into a future land use map. So that was a really quick overview of what's going on. I'm happy to answer questions on any component of this that you would like. I just, we were focusing in on an APFO conversation today, and obviously we have a lot going on with the general plan, but the goal really would be for this whole general plan process to finish up at the end of this year for adoption early next year. So I don't know if that answers some of your questions with how, maybe there could be some, a notion that APFO may change through the general plan process, but.
Sure. Can I finish my question again, Ms. Walsh? Chair Walsh. So I think it's really the question come back to the APFO or Hoco by design, right? And the question is, how can we put the overcrowding of our schools in the discussion, right? And where our school has been in the focus or not in the focus about discussion, because I think everybody agrees our school system is one part of this discussion. Everything we're doing in our planning will impact our school, either overcrowding or concentration of property. And I hope those 2 discussions will be discussed and included, and really it's kind of in the centerpiece of your discussion in terms of Hoco by design. I just don't see that very clearly in your design. I hope both topics will come out from your side as well, that help our school system. It's a mutually beneficial point for these 2 topics.
Yeah, I'm clear. We're clearly hearing that as we engage with the public throughout the process. We are considering impacts to schools. You'll see in the performance measures that are going to come out with the different scenarios. It does look at student population yields. We'll be having additional discussions, probably with the strategic advisory committee on the interplay of schools and the school planning and the general plan and how those two could potentially integrate moving forward. And it's definitely been part of every conversation, as well as environmental impacts and transportation impacts and all the other things we're trying to balance right now. So it's definitely being considered and being discussed, and I think that there'll be more to come with how to address, or at least how to acknowledge the impacts to the schools as one of our resources in whatever growth model we come up with.
I see. Well, now I see lots of hands. Ms. Catroni was first, and then I thought I saw 3 hands. So maybe it was Mr. Youngman, Ms. Delmont Small, and then Ms. Young. Okay, but Director Gown, I'm sorry, I'm cutting in front of you, Vicki. Before we get there, and you say you've had conversations with the public, but I know you've had conversations with us, our office as a council member, like everyone from day one, but before this exercise ever was undertaken, the primary focus was we need to align more closely or at all planning for schools and planning for county growth in general. And so that, of the 3 slides that you put up just in this meeting is the one that shows growth and revitalization of established community. I can look at a map like that and look at an Elk Ridge or an Ellicott City and see that those same, I can have 3 different groups or at least 2 different types of communities feeding into the same schools. So I don't understand how you manage, how am I going to control a Howard High School enrollment if I'm in the same geography feeding into Howard High School, considering some to be, where I do want to concentrate more development and others where maybe I want to limit it more closely. Where did these growth and revitalization established community type categories come from? How will that possibly change as this general plan exercise is undertaken? How will that then do better in terms of linking up schools planning with county growth planning?
So I think some of that will become more clear as we release the scenarios this week, because each scenario, we're at the point where we're just talking about where to focus growth. And so each scenario will have different methods and areas that it's targeting for growth. So those growth and revitalization areas may remain the same in one scenario, and they may be proposed in different areas in different scenarios. So that's the process that we're beginning when we release those different scenarios this week. And from there is where we then develop what we're calling the hybrid scenario. That would be what converts into a future land use map. In terms of, I think the question and what we plan to do through probably a strategic advisory group process is look at how to integrate that with the educational facilities master planning process, because that's really the process where the school piece gets planned. The general plan isn't planning for where schools are going. It's the school's facility planning process that does that. So how do those two better coordinate together? And that's the piece that I think that we need to answer. But we need to wait till we get further along in the general plan process, because we just don't know yet quite where those growth areas are going to be.
Okay, thanks. You're up, Ms. Catronio.
I think Ms. McGowan just illuminated why I'm serving on the Hoco by design, to help marry those 2 pieces, school infrastructure and development in the county. And that's where we were missing with the last general plan, is that marriage. And we see the impacts. We're living with the impacts now. I think where all the rumors about APA being loosened is because it's been mentioned so frequently during the Hoco by design meetings as a remedy to want the goal of increasing affordable housing, increasing density. We've run out of land, so now the only way it seems to be is to go up. in Howard County. And so I think that's where the fear and the community concern is coming in, is that we are hearing about this loosening of APFO as a way to accomplish lofty goals to increase affordable housing and such. But we see the impact of high density housing on our schools, the immediate impact where we can have dozens and dozens, up to sometimes 100 students within 1 year enter an elementary school because of a development, because it's so immediate, as opposed to a housing development where you're building 10 houses a year or resales. There's no impact like that of a high density development. And we see that with Oxford Square. We see that with Blue String. We see the impacts of those developments. So I think when you're having a conversation about increasing those types of developments while loosening APFO, it's extremely concerning for the school system. And when you're not discussing school infrastructure in the same conversation. And so that's, I think where a lot of the concern has come from. And hopefully I can, not singular as me, because there's certainly more than me on the committee that is concerned about this. From people all over are concerned about school infrastructure as we look to the new general plan. So I think that is where the concern is, and that's why Dr. Wu brought this up, I think. But again, it would take legislation. It's not just the committee can decide to loosen APFO. This is a process that comes after the general plan and would take quite a bit of effort and time to do that. So it's not going to be, we're going to change APFO. Thankfully, that is not how we do things. So hopefully I answered some questions on that, but just know I'm on the committee at every meeting and constantly raising the flag about school infrastructure, as are a lot of people, not just me. So that's very comforting. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Cotroneo. Mr. Youngman?
To just a quick follow-up on what Vicki just said was, when talking about the multifamily high-density projects, not only does that enrollment come really fast, because those homes get delivered faster, but if we blow the projections of student yield, that wrong number of kids that we didn't plan on come quickly as well. And I know that this was, I listened to Chair Wu kind of ask what we're doing, but remember, still, these student yield projections for different types of housing developments come out of school planning. And I hope that we're just continuing to audit these things to make sure that those are right. But one of the things that I wanted to ask was, I remember over the last couple of years, whenever we've talked about this topic, pre-general plan, we've talked about getting rid of this existing community, growth and revitalization, all these classifications, and the general planning within the regions that the school system uses, or maybe that's not the right system, but sort of their regional areas are the same as our regional areas. And then within that region, you could have growth and revitalization, existing communities, but you'd still have some alignment, a physical alignment you could see on a map between our planning areas, or the county's planning areas and the school's planning areas. And it doesn't seem like that's really made it into the discussion.
Well, that's interesting, Mr. Youngman. So I don't know if you remember, about a year ago in March, at another joint meeting between the Board of Education and County Council, we had that presentation that talked about that very history that you just indicated. And originally it was like that. So APFO was designed where the school regions equaled the allocation regions. And then that was changed after the 2000 general plan. And the reason it was changed is because the school regions, given the nature of redistricting, changed themselves. So you basically had moving geographies within the general plan, which is a 20-year plan, updated every 10 years, but still a 20-year plan. You had moving geographies with fixed numbers of units. So the decision was made to stick with these planning areas in the 2000 general plan. And then after that, it was switched to what Amy described with the growth and revitalization and the established communities, largely because that was based on the Maryland planning laws that were changed, so the general plan was trying to adhere to that. And the thinking at the time was that that's okay, because when we do our projections of housing units, we actually know where all the vacant land's going to be. We know what's in the subdivision process. We know what's under construction. So on the ground, we kind of know where the future housing's going to be as best we can, given the availability of land, et cetera, and zoning. And every year we update those projections and work with the school system so they kind of know the units over the next 10 years where they're going to be. And that directly, feeds into their student projections with the other items that they include, like birth rates and cohort survival and the resale, the new students from resales and things of that nature. And that leads to the capital budget. So the thinking was that since we plan annually, we kind of know where the units are, that should feed into the capital budget, which then informs where the new schools should be built, new additions should be built, and also may inform redistricting when that happens. So it makes sense to go back to get away from the established, those broad areas for sure. And maybe there's some other areas we can get back to, and that will be informed with the general plan, the Hoco by design process. But I think we may run into the same problem if we try to align the allocation area with the school district areas. Because remember, the general plan plans for all sorts of things, not just schools, roads, police, fire, parks. So we can't, we don't plan just for schools. So to align something in the Hoco by design with schools, may not be the best solution, but there could be a better solution for sure than what we have now.
But then couldn't it be a sort of a county-led, whatever those regions are going to be, that and instead of using their regions and letting them change those regions and us sort of trying to keep up with that, in recognition of what you just said is, you've got a lot of other considerations within those planning regions. County government creates those planning regions, and the school system follows those for their planning within those regions as well, so that it is comprehensive from the top down for schools, roads, parks, and as we started getting into, the different types of housing within each region, that way you'd be hopefully also looking at a little bit more of a micro area to try to get a balance of housing in that micro area. So the same types of housing aren't all ending up in the same place.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing,
sounds like you have to make up something brand new or steal it from somebody else that's figured it out.
Exactly. Just a very brief comment on that is that the county is changing, right? So the old patterns aren't going to be the same in the future, meaning what we're saying is that most of the future growth, the land has been used. There's not a lot of vacant land left. So it's going to be things like if there's a desire to create a new community in Gateway, Columbia Gateway. If that's the case, the future will be more through master planning efforts. So the model would be like downtown Columbia and their SEPAs. And part of their SEPAs, it's a fancy word for saying requirements, public requirements. One of the SEPAs, for example, is to make sure there's a school site available for a new school in downtown Columbia. So there could be a master planning effort for Gateway, and as part of that, given the growth, you would make sure that there are school sites in Gateway. So it's more like the future might be through master planning type of efforts and less more of a countywide sort of, trying to plan development all over the place, because development in the future is going to be largely focused. That's an option we've talked about.
Mr. Brennan, I know for our part on the council, after 2.5 years of receiving reports from DPZ or the school system or a housing survey or whatever, it's disappointing that all of these reports and analysis and studies done with the same county funds always have their own kind of geographic bounds, right? The DPZ planning districts are different than what the school breaks its regions into, is different than the housing survey, so you can never ever match up all of these reports that county funds are paying for by lots of the same, county employees, and actually make a comprehensive, or think you are able even to make any kind of comprehensive analysis or comparison among them. My list says that Ms. Delmont Small is next, then Ms. Young and Ms. Rigby. I thought I saw your hand. Okay, so I can't see Ms. Delmont Small. I'm getting dizzy. This
I'm
is
here.
too hard. All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
No, I think the problem is, here we are yet again talking about the general plan, yet the general plan does not require school sites. The general plan is like the beginning of this train. So why aren't we making sure that having schools in the right places is not embedded into that document? Why don't we have that criteria? That's the absurdity of all of this, is that we're having a discussion for revitalization and increasing density, and we don't even have enough seats right now. I mean, if we were, quote, perfect and we had enough seats for enough students, then we could have these esoteric discussions about, well, this would look great and that would look great. But that's not our reality. Our reality is we have continued to overdevelop in the county without allowing for the proper infrastructure for the schools. That is what has happened. The question is, how do we dig out of this problem? And I truly believe that both the elected bodies of the county council and the Board of Education are, to put it nicely, fed up with this nightmare. And we want to fix this. And we have to figure out how to do it, because we are just continuing over and over and over again. And I understand that we have to worry about other infrastructure, but due to the large amount of the budget that has to go to the schools, and the fact that the schools are very important to the elected bodies in this county and to the county members who are paying taxes, we need to get our arms around this, and we need to start allocating resources in addition to making decisions about development and comprehensive zoning that is not going to work in ways opposite of our goal of having the number of seats we need and getting rid of those darn portables.
Thank you, Ms. Delmont Small. Ms. Young?
My question.
I'm sorry. Mr. Bonnet, can you respond to that, or I saw you pop on your...
Oh, no, I was
Okay.
always up.
Okay. All right, Ms. Young, you're up.
My question is for Ms. Catrinio. Where did you go, Ms. Catrinio? You're still there. Okay. My biggest concern, as you know, when we were putting together the advisory committee last summer, was ensuring that the school voice was being heard. And as a result, we introduced an amendment to ensure that you were on this advisory committee, as well as somebody else from the school district. And I believe that someone from the teachers union.
Josh Lund is on it also. But also, there is some overlap. HCCA Paul Brzezinski has been awesome. I mean, he's been quite, it's overlapping. It's not just in a silo. There are some members of this committee that see the bigger picture and the impact that, the schools, everybody mentioned schools. Basically, when they were talking about their number one priorities, unfortunately, schools was not made a major topic, and we have voiced our concerns and will continue to voice our concerns. Luckily, it's not just me, because I think it would be easy to dismiss the school person who is advocating for schools.
So that was my question.
It is there are people
build group drowning out the schools group.
And I don't want to be at odds all the time. I think, it's, as I said at the last committee meeting, it's not against development. It's pro adequate infrastructure for schools with that development. And whatever the plan is for the county, it's about adequate infrastructure, not just schools, but medical, roads, all of that goes into it. So luckily, it's not just me, because I could be easily drowned out. Oh, she's just interested in what she's interested in because she's representing the school system. It is countywide. It's people, the HCCA, like I said, Paul Brzezinski's been wonderful because he brings that historical knowledge, the institutional knowledge of growth and development in the county that I don't necessarily have, because he's been there, done that, through the building up of Columbia and the schools and the neighborhood schools. I mean, this committee, one of the documents was about neighborhood schools, and that's no longer even possible with the way that we're developed. There are no neighborhood schools. You can get moved, you can be able to see your school, and you get redistricted across town. So the premise that they were relying on, that the neighborhood component included schools, that's not reality. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question. I seem to be rattling on, which I tend to do, but the point is that it's not just the school person advocating for school infrastructure within these committee meetings, and it's been incredibly helpful. And I think the community as a whole is now getting more tuned in to what's going on, because it's going to impact the entire county, this next general plan. So did I answer your question?
Well, I'm thinking maybe as it gets closer and we start seeing an actual plan, it would be good to have you back to review what you think was or wasn't put in the plan regarding school infrastructure. So that we know that if it hasn't been addressed, where the county council might need to go in order to ensure that it has been.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to say, Ms. Coturnio, we added one more thing on your plate.
It's fine. This is what I'm passionate about, and I'm interested in. And so, as you know, I'm a little bit fanatical about it. But,
so I want to thank you for your extra service here.
Absolutely, and thank you for nominating me for the committee.
It was our pleasure.
And maybe we can set up some sort of formal reporting back of what's going on to the county council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coturnio. Director Gallen?
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Coturnio, for sitting on our committee. I mean, you really understand this stuff, and we really appreciate having you on there because there's a lot of details and you really understand all the components of it. So I do really appreciate having you on there. I guess I just wanted to, I don't want there to be a perception that we're not addressing the school issue. Because we absolutely plan to discuss schools and try to have a focused conversation on schools. We're just not there yet in the process. So, I didn't get to do a dog and pony show on the general plan because I wasn't asked to do that today. I could have spent a half hour informing you on the Hoco by Design and where we are. We have over 4,000 comments from the public right now. We're trying to synthesize all that. We're at a very high level on issues. We're trying to balance the input that we've received. We're trying to incorporate the assessments that were done that identified the existing conditions in the county and areas for further study. And then we've been doing an extensive amount of modeling to come up with the different scenarios that we're going to present. We're still at a very high level. We're still at, concepts and balancing of different topic areas. Once we get through that, and then in addition to that, we're about to embark on a diversity, equity, and inclusion engagement session where we are going out and doing close to 15 different focus groups with underrepresented populations within our community to try to draw them into the process. And so we're all doing this at the same time. There is not a dull moment in our department right now. Once we get through all of that, and then we work towards what we're calling the hybrid, we will be going back out to the Planning Advisory Committee and then discussing, here's where we got with the scenarios. Here are issues we're trying to reconcile. Please help us with, some advice on how we might want to reconcile them for the hybrid. Once we are going through those process, as we identify what those challenging issues are, which I guarantee schools will be one of them, that's where we'll be forming the strategic advisory committees to look at those specific issues. So we're still really at, we're kind of starting to dive into the details with the scenarios, but there still is more yet to come. And we have all of that programmed for late spring, early summer.
Thank you, Director Gallen. Ms. Rigby?
So I wrote a lot of notes because there was a lot of things that I wanted to reply to. But I'm very glad we sort of got to the root of where some of the APFO rumors were coming from, because today was sort of my first hearing of it. And I thought surely if there was going to be legislation regarding APFO, I would have been made aware. But so thank you to everyone for sort of pulling that thread and figuring out where that's where and how those discussions are. Okay, Ms. Mallow, good news. The cat is back. So would like to join. I heard Mr. Brownell say that, she's gone. Mr. Brownell said that there would be large developments and there may be more focused development. And I also heard Ms. Petronio talk about some of the impacts from multifamily developments, that it can be significant at one school. And I think that we've seen that. The projections, when you look at the whole system, you're within a couple percentages of correct or not. But when you drill down into each school, some schools wildly had way more students than were anticipated. And that's one of the things that leads to the challenges with the school planning. So I just want to remind people that we don't have to live like this, and we don't have to develop like this, and there are other options out there. We could do incremental growth by right throughout the county. So it's not a trickle or this fire hose that we've been getting, that we could do things to our code that would allow for diversity of housing types. I just had a conversation, this is not schools, but had a conversation with one of my neighbors. She'd love to downsize. There's nowhere to downsize to in my neighborhood. So if she wants to downsize, she has to leave. Given the continued discussions that we have had around APFO, I think it might be good for us to have a conversation about revenue solutions, because that's critical in terms of, we're talking about how we get money for school, then we need to have financial solutions for how we're going to do that. And so I'm wondering if that might be a beneficial topic for our joint BOE and county council to talk about these revenue solutions, because we're continually frustrated at this, and I think that there are solutions out there that we're not capitalizing on. And I guess to go back to what I just said, one of the biggest ways that you can take away the developer influence is by cutting them out altogether. Empower the homeowner on their property, and provide for gentle density options. Because then if you make it so easy that the developers aren't involved, then you don't have them involved. It would just be our incremental growth within our community. So there are options out there. Just because we haven't done it this way in the past doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future. And I think that if we want to be financially resilient, then we're going to have to be a lot more creative to how we go forward in the future. The only thing I guess I didn't mention is that I'm very glad to hear that Ms. Gowan, you'll be taking on the where and when we plan for schools, because I think at this point only the Oakland Mills cohort is tightly cohorted because of how their community has been developed. They're denser, they have a mix of housing types, they're not so spread out, so there's not that disparity, and you are able to have those tight cohorts in Oakland Mills clusters, but it's a challenge. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Rigby. I will admit, when Dr. Wu presented this topic to us, I thought, Dr. Wu, you were going to the issue that's already been anticipated at the state level, which is by virtue of having diminished enrollments for this, out of whack year, that when this council goes through the exercise of approving the open and closed school charts, which will happen right in June, July, that will have a misleading or understated projection of what next year's enrollments will be in given schools. And I think because of all of these things that have been discussed this morning, it will have really bad impacts, I think, for certain locations and maybe be negligible in others. But I don't, it's not what you wanted to talk about, I understand. And
No, Chair Walsh, thanks for bringing that up. I thought we had a similar conversation, and the conversation is that DPC will not use the decrease the enrollment or their number. They're going to use the project number for their prediction, or maybe the county council need to have a legislation to talk about that, because I think that's important.
Right. So just one thing is that the reduction in the students for September 2020 won't be in the upcoming school chart because it's always at 18-month behind. So basically, the projections that the school system will see in the spring, basically the open close chart that comes out with the feasibility study, will have no impact on that. It'll be the following chart that might, but that could be remedied by the school system not counting that reduction, perhaps. So we, again, DPZ doesn't do the projections and we don't create the open close chart. We give the housing units to the school system. That's an input to that chart. And we update our projections, housing projections annually. But we don't have any impact. We have nothing to do with the school enrollment itself. That's a public school system planning job. But again, the 18-month delay, it shouldn't impact it.
Thank you,
That's delightful
Mr. Brown.
news.
I will
Yeah.
keep that in mind because that delay will come back eventually, right? So we just want to make sure that
Yeah.
like one-time decrease of enrollment will not impact our long-term projection and development. That will have a
Right.
negative impact to the whole school system. Thank you.
Yeah.